Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Center for Architecture and Metropolitan Planning. Welcome back to next Landscape Conference. This is the second day of our conference, online conference that you can watch via app that you are using right now. You can ask us a question. There are 3 sessions in front of us. We will focus on inclusive design, rural space management, city outskirts, and landscape society. So there are a lot of topics to talk about. You have a chance to join our workshops and hangouts. You will find it on a Next Landscape website. You will find the whole program and all speakers that will join our program today. Yesterday we had amazing lectures and discussions that you have been seeing. We were talking with Richard Weller about his global landscape projects. He mentioned hotspot cities. It's about cities that are in conflict with the wild nature and animal species. We had Mette Skjold, CEO of SLR Architects. She's been talking about urban landscape revitalizations in Copenhagen. And we had Charlie Clemons there, and he's a writer and editor of Failed Architecture, and we have been talking about digital landscape and about the fact that video games, can show us how to use landscape and urban landscape beyond the boundaries that we set. You had a chance, or you have a chance to join the discussions. Discussions will be hosted by my colleague Martina Imramovská. Welcome to camp again.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
And you have a chance to join 2 discussions. The session 6 is split in 2, so one will be about city outskirts and one about landscape society. So in your app that you are using, you can choose which session is for you, which is the right one, and you can join it. You can switch between of them, so you will choose which is the one you want to watch. And now we will start with session number 5. It will be about case studies and landscape design. And first speaker is Tao Zhang from Sasaki. He's a trained ecologist and landscape architect, chair of design culture and board of directors at Sasaki. Welcome to Center for Architecture and Metropolitan Planning. Can you hear us well?
Yes, I can.
Welcome to camp.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone in Europe, and good morning to folks in the US. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you very well. Now you have 30 minutes for your lecture, so we are looking for it. And after that, there will be a discussion after the second speaker, so it's yours.
Great. Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to present at the Next Landscapes Conference. And I was telling Sandra and David just now that I was looking forward so much to visiting the city and participating in the discussion. But unfortunately, this is a virtual, but I'm still equally excited. And today's inclusive design was a given topic. Then I thought, what's more appropriate to talk about edge effects in urbanism and ecology, because edges are what we use to define or delineate different systems, different areas. If we want to include, if we want our design to be inclusive, the edges need to be addressed first. Of course, we're not talking about the edge of the U2, and we're talking about edge effects. The tendency of increased variety and diversity at the community junctions. This is defined both by E.P. Odom and Richard Foreman. Both are renowned ecologists. And on the bottom, you see a wide spectrum of different types of edges. And the hard boundaries are what we encounter the most frequently, almost everywhere in the built environment, in man-made environment. They're geometrical, they're more harsh, they're abrupt straight lines. And in nature, we see a variety of different edges, including gradual or gradient, convoluted, or tiny patches of curvilinear edges, or it can be fractal, very fine textured. And we'll quickly see a few examples. And so this is a fairly common picture of a woodland abutting a grassland. And the edge condition might not be that evident to everyday lay people, but I imagine if you do a biological survey, you will see different species, different insects, different bird species living in the different environment. But edge normally is where it's most vibrant, most active biologically. And if you dig into the earth, you'll find that there's a gradient or abrupt change of soil profile, organic matter depth, or even water availability or humidity. So this is an example for one edge condition. And this is another one. This picture just outside of Boston that I took. It's a salt marsh. And we now know wetlands and salt marshes are one of the most vulnerable, most critical, most active, biologically functioning ecosystems in the world. And it not only provides critical habitats to aquatic species, it help mitigate storm surges, infiltrate surface runoff, especially from urban area as well. And it's one of the most diverse ecosystems. And let's gradually shift the lens to the urban environment, where our design is relatively more focused. And probably visually most iconic landscape or urban landscape edges is the Central Park in New York. And you see this stark contrast of densely settled urban fabric abutting a large, open, semi-natural area. And I want to point out that edge effects are not only focusing on ecology. It's not edge does not only matters in rock and roll. It is socially important as well. And we all know that some of the most expensive, desired properties in New York City are aligned along the edges of the Central Park. So edge effects is really critical for designers, for landscape architects, because we're providing design service. We want advocate for ecology at the same time as complex as responding to social and economic challenges as well. Of course, in urban conditions, there are worse cases, worse edges, and this is an example from central China. And the dense new development is taking advantage of all the natural settings and environmental amenities while sacrificing the common good. And this is one of the worst examples of the urban edges. And of course, edges can be intangible as well. It can potentially be more harmful, that the edge is intended and meant to divide, to separate. So that's the edge condition that we try to avoid. And next, I'm going to showcase two of Sasaki's recent projects, one in the US, the other one in Shanghai, because we're a global practice, and then we have projects all around the world. And I want to use these two projects to demonstrate how we integrate edge conditions, edge effects, and systems thinking in our design to emphasize the edges in our public realms, and how to reactivate edges to be socially, ecologically, and economically viable and beneficial. And this is a picture of the Chicago. Chicago back then is not Chicago River Walk, Chicago River Edge. You see, it's fairly typical. This was only about 10 years ago. So typical post-industrial stark edge condition that you don't see any biological activities. It's heavy-duty vertical flood wall defining the water edge, and that there are no social activities either, and no landscape values. So this is some of the most common urban challenges along our rivers in the cities. And the mayor of Chicago had an ambitious goal in the last about 2 decades, trying to create some of the best parks in the world to provide to the communities, and was more suitable, or was a better candidate than its own backyard, than its own urban water, even though it had been neglected and abandoned and polluted for nearly 100 years. And we all know that Chicago River was so polluted that at one point in the history, the river had to be reversed. The flow had to be reversed to prevent polluted water discharge into Michigan Lake. Instead, the city brought water from lake to flush the heavily polluted river, because the discharge was combined sewage and stormwater. And if you can see my cursor, so this is the segment that Sasaki designed. So this is phase 2 of 5 segments of the riverfront. Previously, they were highly fragmented, separated by the bridges, and both horizontal along the river as well as vertically, because those 5 segments were not connected, and any visitors wouldn't have any reason to go down along the vertical flood wall to the water edge and then be stopped by the bridge and come back up again. So the first thing we did was to provide a coherent experience connecting different parts of the river. Then the river edge will be one continuous language. And this is just a quick snapshot of what's completed in 2017. And again, compared to what I showed you, the picture, that bird's eye picture of the stark post-industrial image. So this now today is one of the most desirable urban public spaces in Chicago, especially in the summer. It's such a highly desired hangout place. And that stark vertical change, elevation change from the causeway to the water edge or to the river walk now hosts some of the most vibrant businesses, food and beverages, and just social congregating space. So this is the segment that called Marina that you see providing easy access to the water sports or boats. And you might notice that under the bridge, we build walkways. At the same time, there's an interesting canopy that is reflective. So at 45 degrees, no, not 45, about 30 degrees. So when people walk, that reflective roof is reflecting the water surface and rippling lighting effects. At the same time, it's providing a shelter from the old industrial bridge on the top when heavy traffic goes by. You don't want to collect dust from the truck. And so this is just a snapshot of the type of social activities happen in the summer in that space. And as I mentioned, edge effects is not only about ecology, not only about social activities, it's economic as well. As you see, before the project was completed, and the segment, the part of the river generated very limited income since 2014 and until 2017, when that part of project was finished. The Chicago River Walk businesses generated such exponentially increasing revenue that the city estimated that the federal loan to support this project will be paid back way advanced compared to the original term. So a successful, well-designed project will not only benefit the citizens, it will benefit the city and the overall financial considerations as well. So it's more sustainable. So in the evenings, the park is equally vibrant, and one of the most popular tours in Chicago is architecture tour, boat tour. Previously, most of the boat tours were focusing on the architecture, on the buildings along the river, but now there's another layer of focal point for tourists to pay attention to, as the public space, as the landscape along the river, and of course for waterfront design or edge conditions. Nowadays, climate change is one of the most urgent topics that we have to address. And almost all urban rivers are frequently flooded. And so this has to be part of the consideration. So Chicago River Walk was designed from day one to be able to be inundated, to be able to be flooded, and as it was designed and built according to that standard. So the picture on the right was the same summer when the face opened to the public. So just a month after the opening ceremony, it was completely flooded. But we were not panicking. The city was not panicking, even though there was a new phenomenon for them to allow a brand new park to be completely awashed. And on the left, you see the marks of different water levels as a design thinking. And so that was a really good testament to the design that during an extreme flood event, the park survived really well. Next day, it was power washed and reopened to the public. So it's very educational. And edge conditions doesn't have to be all visible or tangible to everyday people. And in some of the most hardscape and paved areas, we equally considered how to integrate more ecological functions. For example, these trees that we proposed enjoy a large volume of soil compared to most of the typical urban trees, and also with the non-potable irrigation systems underground that will support these urban trees for much, much longer and with a better life. And the edge conditions not only benefit the activities on land, they reactivate the water activities as well. So as you see, before, it wasn't that interesting or attractive for the kayakers or for water sports to even get closer to the edge. It was just old wall. But now with the more accessible edges and more activities, and they're just explosion of new interests and new activities along the water edge. And this is just a picture of a kayak tour to educate people of the new water edge, new waterfront. And again, let's go deeper. And as I said, edge conditions originally it was borrowed from an urban ecology paradigm, and we're not only designing as a designer, so we're not only serving our client as human beings. All the wild creatures, wildlife is what we cared for as well. So in one of the 5 rooms, which called the jetty, the main focus is how to reestablish, help reintroduce some of the wild species, aquatic species, back to the river. We know our impact will be limited, but any effort is eventually will accumulate to a bigger impacts. So we studied the fish species in the Chicago River in the past, in history, as well as Lake Michigan, and the responding bird species and population as well. Look at the species and their desired spawning habitat to see what we can do while redesign this part of the river. And then you see, we introduced the floating wetlands because after all, it's urban water edge. Much of the infrastructure and engineered infrastructure need to be maintained for the safety issue. So we introduced wetland, including submergent species, emergent species, and as well as inundation tolerant species. So this is what people can see, what people can experience as a sort of typical landscape elements. But what's underneath is not most people knew that we put a lot of effort to do. This is more critical ecologically than aesthetics. So we propose a biofilm and lunker system underneath to provide fish habitat. And next diagram well explain. So previously, the water edge was just a stark vertical wall, and concrete wall, or a bulkhead. And fish is just like human being. We don't want to hang out in a completely exposed industrial or parking lot, right? So human beings don't like that. And we like shelter. We like, a diverse environment. We like, protection from the predators. Fish is the same in the water. And we need to reintroduce a more nuanced, more spatially diverse habitat for fish, for the juvenile to survive, for fish to hide from their predators, and also provide a surface for phytoplanktons to reproduce. So to rebuild that food web system. So these are just examples of some of the fish habitat that we studied and we tested in the lab, in a model shop. And quickly, the study was translated into reality. This was in the process of construction of the floating wetlands, and these are the underwater system. And doing the construction on the left, and then the tests in the lab on the right. And then after all those facilities were installed, and we start to look at the surface where most of the public will experience and see. And this is early in the spring, I think it's in April, March, April, the wetland was started to be in place. And you can see the structure of the floating base, and then the planting bed on the top. So in May, the seedlings were sprouting, and then quickly in the summer, in August, wetland was reestablished pretty well, and ready to be presented to the public. And you may notice there are a series of stainless steel posts or pillars to anchor the floating wetlands, because wetlands will rise and fall according to the water level in the river. And there are marks on those posts as well. They're educational to remind people that Chicago River is not a swimming pool, it's not a bathtub, it's not a static, it's a dynamic. Nature is dynamic. Each time you come back, you see a different river. The environmental educational purpose of the structure. And on the left, even though vertically the wall was still maintained to prevent from flooding, wetland softened the edges, and people are drawn towards the water edge again. And similarly to what I mentioned, that the water activities, kayaking activities, boating activities become more interested in the edge conditions instead of just linear experience traveling through the water. People start to interact with people on the bank, vice versa. People are looking at water activities, so the river becomes a more active, more diverse edge experience. So that's a quick introduction of Chicago River Walk. And now I'm going to talk about another project in Shanghai that we completed fairly recently in the last 5-6 years, but we started 13 years ago in Shanghai. It's 7 hectares of urban park. And this is, I'm going to talk a little bit more scientifically about this project after showing you all the design intentions and the pictures. So Jiading Park is on outskirts of Shanghai in Jiading District, which is one of the most automobile industrial districts in China. Volvo has a research center there, and multiple other automobile manufacturers facilities are located in this district. So overall, it's industrial, and the park was built upon a post-industrial as well as fragmented abandoned farmland. And this is a really good example of landscape urbanism, because the district mayor actually was trained as an architect. So he knew the potential of a good design as a catalyst to guide, to lead the urban fabric and urban development. So he didn't want to introduce urban development and then only give the leftover land to open space. So the park was really strategic. It was the first piece of the new district. Shortly after the light rail system was in place, as you see, the park is served by a light rail system with a station right next to it. And you notice that it's a linear park, and that's it has multiple layers of the meaning that is related to edge effects. So this is just a quick picture of the park after completion in the first season. As you see, most of the trees are still quite young, seedlings, and from far away on the picture, you see there aren't that many development yet, but you start to see new construction coming. So that was the intention of the city, using the park itself to drive what type of development, what type of civic spaces will be suitable for a more holistic new district. Let's go back to the original challenges. So this was the land given to us. It's about 2.3 kilometers long, so it's 7 hectares large. The first challenge we received was the park was bisected by 9 streets. And I'm talking about edge effects or inclusive design. This 9 cutting through streets are just providing too many. If you remember the diagram of the edge conditions, harsh, geometric, dividing edges, and that's what we do not want, especially for open space, for green space. So the first thing we did was looking at the transportation pattern of the whole district and understand which are critical, which are more regionally connected to the bigger pattern. And we propose to reduce from 9 to 3 crucial streets. In this way, we can create a more continuous park experience as well as uninterrupted habitat. And when we first visited the site in 2007, 2008, the park, as I said, was post-industrial and with some of abandoned patches of post-agricultural patches. And it pretty much had no wetland, even though it had a canal, it had a remnants of canal systems on site, connecting upstream to the city and then downstream to different part of the district. Some of the examples you see that, of course, poor water quality, and then occasionally you see hard canal edges with the discharges, suspicious discharges from whatever, either industrial or combined sewage from adjacent area. And then there are construction debris. There's no vegetation buffer. So you can imagine that the water has no protection. And of course, there's no wildlife. So 0 hectare of wetland left on site. And one of the first big moves was that if we want to keep the water feature, we have to reintroduce wetland. And as a protection, as a more accessible and welcoming, inviting edge conditions along the water instead of the concrete wall or a construction debris or exposed soil without vegetation, and use that to improve habitat and to use wetland terraces to mitigate, to collect it, to infiltrate urban runoffs from adjacent development. Especially the purpose of the park is to stimulate future development. So there will be increasing impervious surface, and as a result, you will receive more surface stormwater. So wetland and terraces will help mitigate that. And then overall restore riparian edges to provide habitat, and then eventually we want to introduce wildlife. At that point, neither the client, the city, nor us were very confident, because how heavily degraded that ecosystem was. We were trying, but we didn't know if we would succeed. So 6 hectares of wetland was introduced. And then we'll look at the terrestrial ecosystem. So before before that, most of the vegetation was second growth or weedy invasive species after agricultural practice left the site. And we reintroduced 12 hectares of woodland, forest, and tree groves, a spectrum of different type of public space, from a more curated urban plazas with tree groves and bamboo grove to the west of more of a uncared or more organic urban forest. And in the end, the result was a reintroduction of over 20,000 native trees, all native to the lower Yangtze River region, including 94 species. And then this is a picture of before in 2007. It's a direct industrial runoff, hardened canal edge. And this was the phase 1 construction. Incrementally, we regraded edges to make sure it's more accessible to wildlife and also to help you establish vegetation. And this is the first season, first spring, and the seeds start to sprout, but it doesn't look that natural yet. And we understood, again, it was a restoration project, as we didn't expect that to be lush right away, to be diverse right away, but incrementally more species will kick off and there's a natural succession underneath. In the same summer, some of the wetland grasses were just growing as crazy because the water was so rich of nutrient, nitrogen, phosphorus. And interestingly, Phragmites, which is invasive in the US, is native there. And we just let it grow, let it take up all the nutrients in the urban canal to help clean the water. And for a 2.2, 2.3 kilometers long urban park, the edge conditions are not just homogeneous, one condition, and it's supposed to be diverse, especially because the park is intentioned to stimulate future growth, future urban development. This is an example of a more welcoming plaza along the edge of the park that will invite and accommodate future office workers in the district. And in the interior of the park is more tranquil, so people can enjoy their personal time protected by metal and looking at the water. And this is a picture of the wetland terraces in the first season. Again, it doesn't look that natural or diverse yet, but we knew over time, give it time, nature will do its job and take over. But the water edge, if you see my cursor, were quite satisfying. Even in season 1, we saw how much nutrient was uptaken by those reed grass, and they could be harvested in the winter to help just offset more nutrients. And we were really, really happy to see some of the wildlife start to come back. That's the egret. And in the background, those are 2 large ginkgo trees that we protected on site. And those were very few existing vegetation when we visited the site. So we took all the effort to protect them. And then recreational fishing is a really good sign, similar to Chicago River, as a sign for the public to accept the water quality improvements. So when people feel safe to come here for recreational fishing, it's a really it's a good sign of the public acceptance. Okay, so that's the design part. That's how everyday people, lay people understand it. But as designers, we really wanted to know and ask ourselves, are they really ecological? Are they performing scientifically? So I just borrowed that sentence from the movie. So let's science the shit out of this. And again, as designers, myself was trained as an ecologist and a landscape architect, but I wanted to work with scientists. I want to work with unbiased third party to help us monitor and evaluate how landscape is performing. So we work with a local university in Shanghai because the park is in Shanghai. We work with Urban and Regional Ecological Restoration Lab at East China Normal University. In the project, the 1 year long field study and the lab analysis became one graduate student's thesis work. So we were really happy that a real world challenge provided a opportunity for academic studies. And on the top is the illustrated plan from 2008 to 2009, and on the bottom is the Google Earth photo. And as you see, the park was implemented exactly as how we designed. And just quick summary. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are 2 sampling sites for the graduate student to sample water, air, biomass. And you might notice that 4 is a outlier. So 1, 2, 3 are from upstream to lower stream, because the park, as big as it is, we're still receiving water directly from outside, from upstream. That is out of our control, could be heavily polluted. We do not know. And number 4 actually is a control. If you're familiar with the biological or scientific vocabulary, so control is a separate environment that is as a comparison, as a baseline comparison to the rest of the experiment. So 4 is a detached water body. It was intentionally designed as a way to test if the park could perform without external input, external pollution, if the wetland and the park can completely mitigate environmental challenges, and how much it can compared to the rest. So we measured water quality, air quality, in the vegetation and microclimate. And then students start to go out every month to collect water samples and bring them back to the lab to analyze, including parameters like COD, BOD, total nitrogen, phosphorus, clarity, and chlorophyll, etc. So those index all measure different properties of water quality. For the interest of time, I'm going to speed up. And so COD, BOD, nitrogen, phosphorus, I'm going to just highlight the pattern. You might notice from upstream 1, 2, 3, and except for COD, that is consistent pattern from 1, 2, 3. The longer the bar, the heavier pollution it is, and the narrower the bar, the relatively more clean it is. So 1, 2, 3, you see from upstream to lower stream, the park is improving water quality throughout the different seasons. And for nitrogen and phosphorus, it's more pronounced. And the number 4, the site detached, that is completely surrounded by the park and the wetland, is performing the best throughout category. And this is a picture of the number 4, the detached lotus pond site. It was an experiment to be blocked from the main canal system. So counterintuitively, normally we would see connectivity for hydrology as most critical. But here, with a larger challenge from the context, the detached water body performed the best. And these are just a quick summary of each index from COD, which is the chemically or oxygen demand, to measure the chemical pollutants in the water. As you see, 4 is the best, and 1, 2, 3, increasingly becomes clean. And the number 1, which is from outside the site, directly from upstream, is above that dashed line, which is polluted water level. And the same to BOD, and the 4 is the best, and 1, 2, 3 is following the same pattern, and the nitrogen and the phosphorus. And to visualize it, and we did include site 4 because it's a more controlled environment. So 1, 2, 3 has an increasing performance, and for site 3, a lower stream, it can take up to 66% of nitrogen and up to 97% of phosphorus. So as a result, the water looks better to the public, but scientifically, we felt more confident after this project that, well, we can learn the lessons and apply that to the future projects. And with that, I welcome your comment, critique, and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your lecture. It was a very wide range of projects and problems you solved, especially the Chicago River Walk. I really like that one, so I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much again. And now it's time for second speaker of this session. That will be David Cloet from Carre and Brands from Netherlands, and his partner and landscape architect at Carre and Brands. Welcome here in Center for Architecture and Metropolitan Planning.
Well, thanks a lot for your invitation. I'm going a bit in a different route than Tao did, although you can see a lot of similarities maybe. Let me see. Yeah, this is my office. We are with 40 people stationing in Hilversum in the Netherlands. And we have a site office in Hamburg, Germany, in which we work on a lot of urban projects, urban planning, and all the way up until regional scale and architecture. So we have quite a wide range of projects, but we're highly a design and strategy-based office. I'm just quickly going to show you some images. I don't want to go into that too much. We work highly from a very Dutch perspective of doing, and the Dutch landscape is quite a specific landscape. Since we are in the end of the European delta, a rather small country. So in fact, 60% of our country is below sea level, and most of that was man-made. So over the centuries, the Dutch created their own land, and by that their own landscape. So in comparison to other countries, which are mostly have kind of a nature or oriented landscape, we have a very much man-made landscape. Consists out of the biggest part of the Netherlands. So I'm originally from the southwestern islands of the Netherlands, and I'm now based in Amsterdam. Which is both under the floodplain level of the Netherlands. So we have this long civil engineering knowledge of how to create land by using nature, but also using technology. And that gave us fantastic landscapes, such as this Beemster polder, which is UNESCO heritage. Large landscapes that were very efficient for food production, but also did it the other way around. We dug out large part of our peat landscapes as one of the first energy landscapes. That we had. We dried the soil, which is mostly organic material, and used that as an energy source in our houses, but also in industries. Well, and by that we created super interesting landscapes, or at least for me as a landscape architect, all based a lot on the system of water. And since we have all these levels of lands, and we want to, and we are at the end of the delta, we have to be very smart on how to deal with water, how to dry out our lands to keep our lands safe. And with this very ingenious system of water level, consisting out of windmills, which pumped the water. Now slowly, of course, these water levels or these water mills, they have changed to steam engines, and after that, electrical engines. And this is much rooted in our in our culture. Right? This reclaiming land, that was our pride. So we made our land safe, and even when we were backfired, we picked it up again and created more solid base against the dangers of nature. Again, when this is the last flood in 1953. This is the farm of my grandfather, who then got flooded. And after this, they built the Delta Works to create a stronger barrier against the water, while to keep the people and the hinterland safe. Yeah, and this is very much also what we are known for. So it's almost an export product. So if you have a water issue, you can call in the Dutch. As I said, it's very much rooted in our culture and in the way we pronounce these things in art, in design. It's very much based on how we created our polders itself, and even our king is an expert in water management. But then the question also comes in that by using this great amount of technology, is also a question on how long can we keep on doing this, and how long can we battle against the forces of nature. And so we did this study back in 2018 for how to organize the Netherlands in a new way, and how do we take upon these challenges that we have that come with the climate change, but also the societal changes that we encounter. And this was an unsolicited study, which we still continue from time to time. So since we are at this kind of this delta landscape, we encounter huge problems with the rising of the sea in future. Back in 2018, the numbers were a bit more positive than nowadays. But our biggest problem is maybe the water that comes from the rivers and cannot go into the sea anymore, and that floods the hinterland. Well, at the same time, we encounter issues with urbanization. So finding spaces for these two, there's already a conflict in itself. Back in 2018, again, we were encountering the challenge for 600,000 houses until 2040. Recently, the government made a call for 1 million households in 2030. And then we have, like all European countries, we have this Paris agreement for the CO2 emissions. Well, and to be honest, the Netherlands are quite poor in this. So I think we are somewhere at the bottom of the European ranking list when it comes to the CO2 emissions. And then of course, which is also a global issue, a further loss of biodiversity. Which we might want to tackle and get a new challenge for renewable energies. where we also are kind of at the bottom of the European ranking list. So the Netherlands has a lot of catching up to do. And again, the question then arises in how you can do this, and can you still keep on making man-made dikes to prevent land from flooding, spending a lot of money in it? And even when we look further, which is a bit hypothetical what I'm saying now, but even when you look further, and in planning you sometimes need to look into a further future. Yeah, then the question becomes what is this new landscape that we are creating to keep our feet dry, and does that still work? Or is it time to think differently about our way of planning? And maybe we should go from, let's say, this technical delta engineer, this exports, this Dutch export project, working against the forces of nature. Maybe we have to go into more of a cool surfer that comes, that moves along with nature. And that we are a bit more flexible in that sense, and resilient to the forces that nature have, and use those as a part of our planning tools. And that also means that maybe the political strategy or the logic has to change. At this moment, the whole spatial planning of the Netherlands is just divided over five different ministries that hardly work together, and that only takes parts of sectors of the problem to their program. And then maybe the question that came to our mind was that maybe we should think differently in the sense, and use the subsoil and the natural conditions as a new governance and political logic, but also in that create a new kind of scale of political interventions that is more suitable to the landscape, and give every landscape its own quality. Therefore, we created this concept that we call the 7 new Netherlands, with robust and landscape typologies that each work from their own strength and each from their own nature. And in that, we much more wanted to go from a linear planning approach, where things were also solved a lot with technology, to a more circular and integrated approach. And in that technology can still have its place. So I'm not bashing that. But the way of thinking could be more ecological oriented. So we created this new landscape. So we thought, so when you have these new challenges, and these challenges that are so big, we also create new landscapes. As our, let's say, in the 16th and 17th centuries, we did with our landscapes. And it doesn't mean that you have to erase everything, but you make a landscape that are more adaptable to these changes. So, for instance, this delta landscape, which is the end of the delta where it hits the North Sea, where we give the landscape back to the nature, and work with different kind of energy production and saline agriculture. Or more from the river side, where we create a kind of room for the river 2.0, which was very successful program that ran the last 25 years, where we gave rivers more space for over flooding, and at the same time create a robust ecological network with that. Maybe that should get a new kind of larger goal with it, with compact cities that are protected in the landscape. Or in the south of the Netherlands, which is much more a mosaic landscape, much more locally based and autarkic way of living, where everyone lives in kind of small communities, or just in the north of the Netherlands, where we created large forests that also can help us with the CO2 emissions and as building products and as large, vast natural landscapes. Well, then maybe from sometime I already said in my first slide, 70% of the Netherlands is in the lowest part of the or 60% of the inhabitants of the Netherlands are on the lowest part of the land. Maybe until a certain point we should keep that. So until maybe until 2100 it's or 2100 it's still feasible to keep part of this, but maybe we should also slowly rethink the position that we as humans live. And maybe it's at some point it becomes stupid to keep on living on the lowest part of our country. And maybe in the long term we should move to the higher grounds and give back to nature at some point parts of land. This way of thinking we created starting in 2018 as an unsolicited study, and since then we've been advising natural government on this thinking. Which is of course highly abstract, but sets out a future agenda. And I'm also working this through in my studio. I have the design studio at the Amsterdam Academy of Architecture, where I work with landscape architects, urbanists, and architects on some elaborations of this project. This is an example on the southwestern delta, where this delta works came after the flood in 1953. That protected the land, but also created a kind of a dead water behind it, with huge ecological changes, also in terms of food production, and this has changed a lot. And this is one of my students who studied on recreating an estuarium out of this landscape again. So going back to the past a bit more, to go instead of making lakes, he wanted to create an estuarium in which he uses the sedimentation, so the natural processes as part of the defense of the land, and created edge conditions for new kinds of ecology and leisure. So he set out a set of interventions to get the sludge and the sedimentation safe on the land, and over a long period of time create a new delta landscape out of that, in which he also could enhance a stronger ecological landscape, He used food production techniques to hold in the sedimentations. So it also has an economical factor in it, and could hold a large part of the CO2 emissions that we have in the Netherlands. So you see that it's kind of this multi-layered and a more holistic approach to planning also leaded to kind of a layer cake of solutions and possibilities. And so then it could look like this on some places. So after 40 or 50 years, we could have this kind of landscapes in it. Will hopefully slowly but surely create a delta landscape again, in which the sedimentation can prevent itself again and protect the land in it. And of course, there's still human interventions in this. So we can help and steer get the nature and the natural processes in the way that we would like to have them. But making much more use of the process itself again. And this is the second project in the north of the Netherlands, which was always quite known until the 17th century for its huge water surplus that the soil applied. So the soil was full of water. Very, very strong and productive landscape, which slowly but surely is being salinized now by ground streams from the sea, which give pressure to the sweet water bubble on the land again, because we pump out our sweet water now to the sea. So he was looking for a more balanced way of dealing with this landscape again, working again with this natural processes to solve this issue in the Dutch water system. So he created the 6 types of landscape out of that for this northern part of the Netherlands, in which he created new landscape based on water production and water storage. That leads to a beautiful new kinds of landscape, also possibilities for new ecological landscapes. Also, so the part that is close to the Waddenzee, which is in the northern part, the Waddenzee is kind of a sedimental inner sea that slowly but surely will get totally flooded over water by the changing of the water levels of the sea. So he created a new Waddenzee in it. And he worked with this very intelligent water system that has become a kind of a national scale. He brought that back to a regional scale again, where leisure, food production, and ecology work again with the water, instead of working against this water and constantly manipulating this natural process of the water. And well, and by that, we always call this the Dutch topography. We have height differences in the Netherlands of maximum 10 or 20 centimeters. But in the 20 centimeters, you could create a lot of gradients of nature, filtering landscape, like also as Tao was just showing in his park design. You could also bring this back to a regional scale, where you process water and clean out the soil that is for centuries polluted by the agriculture that we put on it. and in the end, creating also this robust landscapes with it. So this ecological corridors, but at the same time also new land of production, which we are very, very famous for, and where we also have a large part of our economy is part of that. But it all starts with the notion that we maybe have to change our way of thinking before it's well, we cannot reverse the process anymore. So there are a couple of large challenges that come that you have to watch us as a society, and I think planners and landscape architects should be involved in that and should be solve these challenges in a smart and in a bold way, and in enhancing this holistic and natural view towards the landscape, to create again a new performative landscape that is adaptable to these changes. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much for your lecture. And now it's time for a short discussion that will be held by Martina Imramovská. So welcome back on stage, and now you can join the discussion.
Thank you, gentlemen, for very interesting presentations. I have to say that they were so complex that it's really hard to ask any question. Anyway, I'll try. My first question goes to Tao, and it's about the Jiading Central Park. Can you please repeat once again what is the water source, and where does the outlet of the park go?
Shanghai, you might not be familiar with. Shanghai is on the lower Yangtze River Delta. It's somewhat similar to what David described, the kind of urban fabric that is dealing with inundation, flooding, and shallow groundwater. And Shanghai used to be covered by really extensive canal systems because originally, Delta area was a wetland, and then 2,000 years ago it was managed, converted to agricultural land, and then since then the canal system, the web of canal system have persisted in Shanghai. And in most of the right now in the core of Shanghai, it's not that common anymore, but on outskirts you still see the extensive web of the canal system, as you see on the map. And in general, it's from upland to lowland to Yangtze River Delta to the Yellow Sea.
Okay.
So on this diagram, you see water from left is the upper stream, and it goes downstream. Eventually, will be discharged into the sea. And but overall, Shanghai has a very sophisticated water gate system to control water flow. Sometimes, occasionally, water might backflow from the sea back into the canal system. And again, we're only 2.2 kilometers long, but Shanghai, there are thousands of kilometers waterways, and most of water are well connected. So we had no control for was coming into the site from urban pollutants. Okay. And even if we could clean everything in our park, if there's a one outlet upstream, with discharge directly from a industrial or combined sewage, then that becomes a main challenge. So that's quite common, and we're just trying to make incremental changes, especially as a demonstration to the public, to the city, that what a well-designed ecological park can do to the city. Hopefully that will be amplified and scale up to the city level.
Okay, so what source of water goes to this water system? I mean, surface water, all of it? And sewage and black water.
Stormwater.
Just
right now, it's stormwater. Yeah, because sewage, combined sewage was decades ago. So now just stormwater, surface runoff.
Okay, and what is the source for the area number 4?
Source
of the
is
water.
seepage. It's seepage. As I said, it's a delta area, so groundwater is fairly shallow. Once you detach that segment from, here, this diagram, you see this? Here, it used to be just part of the canal network, but since it was was a dead end, and we decided to detach that just to see what the park can perform to improve water, but in a almost like environmentally controlled vacuum for wetland to perform. Yeah. So a C page from stormwater from surrounding neighborhoods within the park, and as well as from groundwater.
Yeah. You're working with a very large-scale projects, and they're situated within a very dense urban area. How do you ensure that they are inclusive for all the social groups and all the inhabitants?
That's a very good question. In the US, it's integral part of the design, including Chicago River Walk. We would reach out, partner with the consultants, partner with the client, with the public agencies to reach out to the communities. And we take multiple public outreach meetings to solicit public input, and sometimes, confrontations. Their argument, their debates, but we think that's a really healthy part of the design. But the critique is definitely valid for our practice in some of the other regions, including China. And we have an office in Shanghai. But one of my personal struggle is that there's a lack of public engagement. And often as designers, we don't make decisions. When we are invited to the table, the decision, much of the upstream decisions are made already. We're giving a land, and we don't even have access to the community. And I've tried more, on an academic level, how to expand that, how to find a more strategic way to reach out to the public. And we've originally I was going to show another project because time limit, I didn't include it. We use mobile and smartphone technology. Right now it's easier to reach out to broader community anyways. With the digital tools, we reach out to 65 local residents on an urban park, urban waterfront, and that was really successful. But overall, that is something that I'm trying to find to involve more public voices in a country like China.
Yeah,
it's still a challenge.
It's on your website that you used some kind of technology for Wuhan Yangtze Riverfront Park, and it has 65,000 comments.
Yes.
How did you process
it? That was the project I was going to show. I was debating between Wuhan. It was more of a planning. Judging is a build, and for that one, we worked with the government. And right now, I'm really happy to see there's a trend that there's a increasing government advocate for public engagement. That after a plan is proposed for public spaces, the plan and the design has to be posted on the government's website for 3 months or a certain period of time for the public to review. If there's a strong resistance, the design has to be either rediscussed, re-evaluated. And for that one, public agency really facilitated us to build a website that people could access on their smartphone or on their computer to review the design, participate in the discussion, and provide their feedback. And also offline groups, the citizen groups were organized to tour the site. And we even did something really interesting to invite the senior citizens to post their original photos and ask younger generations to match the photos of the same scene in the park. That was really heartwarming. So, their grandpas post a photo standing on the same spot on a riverfront, and then young kids posting another one matching the same view. That was quite interesting.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from the audience, from Marek, and it's for both speakers. So what is your role in the projects that you show? How does the coordination and the role of the landscape architects work within the team? And maybe now we can give word to David and go back to Tao then.
Yeah, well, I think in this case, my answer is relatively simple because it was an unsolicited study. So we teamed up in our office with a group of 10 to 15 people from time to time to make this discussion and in the end make this plan. Which we then presented to the board. It's a bit difficult translation, but it's the board of the natural environment, which is an advisory board for the Ministry of Economics, which have most of the planning in the Netherlands in their task group. So we provoked them to with this plan, but it was really an in-house product that then came out. But yeah, normally we always work in large teams for all our projects, so it's not. Well, it's never us who does the job. So in that sense, this is kind of an exception, because well, you never get these kind of questions happening, but it's a nice thought experiment that helped us a lot also with envisioning our own plans again, or things that we saw happening in society.
And within that 10 to 15 people, it was landscape architects only, or what was the professions? Because I know that your office is interdisciplinary.
Yeah, no. So all our projects are always done in a mix of people. So it's always architects, the designers, urbanists, and the landscape architects. And we took an ecologist in for 1 or 2 sessions for expertise. And also the studio that I'm running at the Amsterdam Academy of Architecture, that's always interdisciplinary. And I think that's also the interesting part of it, to cross boundaries of our field of work. And to educate architects sometimes, but also learn from the architects again. So to mix up this ecological thinking with the architectural thinking.
Yeah, definitely. Tao, and in the projects you show, how was it?
Sure. Yes, I like what David said. Educate the architects. Keep it in this audience. Well, both Chicago Riverwalk and Jardine Park were competitive. So it was a competitive pursuits. So we won the project, and so normally at Sasaki, Sasaki is an interdisciplinary practice of 300 plus people. The home base is Boston. We have a Denver office. We have a team in Shanghai, about 30 people. Almost none of the projects at Sasaki ever is run by one single discipline. So the teams are always diverse, interdisciplinary, and including urban planners, urban designers, landscape architects, ecologists, civil engineers, and then architects depends on the scopes. And we also have a special team at Sasaki called Sasaki Strategies. It's a team of experts with diverse background, including architecture, including computer science, including mathematics. So these are the brain powers, about 10 people, exploring data, exploring digital tools to facilitate it, to guide the design. They're not making design decisions, but they're providing evidence to help facilitate the design, including GIS analysis, even though the teams can do, but they do at a much upper level, and big data, and to try to find the emerging patterns that are otherwise not evident to people, especially for our academic work. When we work with the universities, it's complex space planning, we heavily rely on data. And for going back to Chicago Riverwalk and Jardine, so for Chicago Riverwalk, I was an ecologist at the beginning, and then I led the post-occupancy research afterwards. And for Jardine, I was one of the lead designers since 2008, and I designed this wetland. I still remember the wetlands shapes just came from a semi-arbitrary hand sketch, and then gradually, 10 years later, they become lush, reality. So that's a really rewarding experience. And then I also led the research collaboration with the local university for that 1 year monitoring, environmental monitoring. The organization normally at Sasaki for Shikaku River Walk, the team size varies from 5, 6 to at one point to over 10 people. Really depends on which phase, to SD, DD, CD. Constructing documents might require more manpower. And for Jiading, because it's quite large, it's 70 hectares for urban park, and you might know that projects in China are relatively fast-paced, and the government always wants everything overnight, everything better, everything overnight. So sometimes the team can grow up to 15, but sometimes other projects either with more reasonable schedule and can be just 2 or 3 people, but almost never as one single discipline. And most of the employees actually at Sasaki have multiple backgrounds. Myself, I have 3 different graduate degrees from different areas, and it's quite common people can understand, can straddle different disciplines.
And you mentioned it, but could you describe it a little bit in more detail, the process of such interdisciplinary team?
Sure. And the mechanism is one principal, one partner as PIC is in charge of the overseeing the entire progress, responsible to coordinating with the client and for decision making. And then we have a PM, and then again, because most of the our colleagues or employees have multiple backgrounds, it's never defined that you are the landscape architect on this project. We always work as a group, and we're proud of the flat structure at Sasaki that ideas, is the loudest voice. It's not your seniority or your rank. Sometimes some of the best ideas come from an intern, and that's how we struggle so much during the pandemic, because for creative pursuits, working remotely is really cumbersome. And in the past, we would sit at a table, we would sketch together. I personally really like sketching. When I run a team or a project, I'll often force my team, let's stop talking. I'll give you 15 minutes, everyone. Sketch out your biggest idea, your quickest idea. The sketch can be ugly, but that's something that is distilled from your mind in 15 minutes. And that's the most stimulating experience. 15 minutes later, you have a abstract sketch, and then you talk about your sketch. And then you will be surprised after 2 hours in the afternoon for a really complex project, you will see emerging pattern or common idea consensus coming out. And that's something that I really enjoy. However complex, it has to come from an idea. It's not coming from an analytical processes, but it's an iteration. So you come with idea, and then you have to prove it, and you test it with the rational analytical process, and you might dispose it. You might come back and then reinvent it, the whole thing. But that's the process to make your design more rational, more logical.
Yeah, thank you very much. David, I wanted to ask if people are aware of this issue that the Netherlands is facing. And actually, there's also a question from the audience, from Tomasz, who is asking that if you think that culture or artistic creativity can somehow help in the interpretation of your intentions to get the interest of the general public.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, let me first answer the first part. I think people are aware of it. Up until now, let's say the newspapers are full of it. But you don't always recognize things in your own life. So let's say these processes of urbanization, of landscape processes, they are mostly slow processes. So you don't immediately see it. But let's say the last 10 years, we encountered a lot of issues with drier summers. So wetness is maybe a problem, but dryness is maybe even it's getting even a bigger problem in the Netherlands, where the dikes what they break down because there was no water in it anymore. we couldn't water our gardens anymore, and we were asked to shower less, which sounds a bit ridiculous maybe in the Western European country. But we encountered that problem of having too little sweet water. And by that, a lot of changes happened in the natural situation. So we had way too much mice after that, who ate all the crops from our land. So within this ecological processes, you said also within the agricultural system that we have, there are many diseases in the last 10 to 20 years. But that look a lot like the COVID pandemic that we have now, and that also they have a kind of a similar background. People only still have to understand that that is part of the choices we can make, and we can still steer things in a different in a different way. And I think artists and in the Netherlands also the design, there is this thing called the Dutch design, which is quite popular. They can help us with bringing across this message, but also translating the things that scientists say into images and more poetic thoughts. So I think one of the strengths that we have as these as designers is the ability to imagine a future which is not there. And I think as landscape architects, we have an extra thing that we have a more holistic view towards a whole set of the challenges that we encounter. So, well, you see it with all the projects that have been shown here, is that it's never one thing that leads to these design. It's always a multitude of things that help to improve the natural environment, where also humans benefit from. So, well, in the end, we will benefit from that too. But I think in the Netherlands, this whole idea of the imagining has started and is quite strong. And you slowly come to see now that the political shift is moving slowly, bit by bit, to get towards this. But I think for the general public, this transition is quite strong, which is also, of course, scary. So we need to make this transition, and it has to come. And the longer the wait, the more difficult it becomes. But making a transition is not easy for everyone.
That's what I wanted to ask, that this project of 7 new Netherlands, if it wouldn't cause migration of inhabitants within the state. You mentioned it, that it might happen, that people would move, but do you think it's realistic?
Yeah, sure. I think we already have a policy now that when you are living in the floodplains of rivers, you cannot get a full insurance on your house.
Okay.
And at some point, when you are flooded once or twice, you encounter all these costs. And we had this summer. So large parts of Germany, Belgium, and the south of the Netherlands were flooded with huge costs. Just by damage on houses, on infrastructure, etc. So at some point, these costs, they become bigger than moving. So let's say for centuries long, people looked for the highest spot to build their house, because you were high and dry. So that was the let's say part of the natural way of thinking in the Netherlands. And if you didn't have a high point, you would make a dike. Then you have a higher point. Or It's quite simple thinking, and when there's economics behind it, on the long term, you will see a shift happen.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, thank you both for very interesting presentations. I really appreciate that you are part of our conference. And I'll give word to Jirka now, and I'll see you all later. Thank you.
Thank you both too. Now we are going to have a short break, but the session 6 is split in two. You can choose which one is the one you want to watch. You can use bookmarks on the top of the website. There is a bookmark room 1 and bookmark room 2. If you choose room 1, you will join me and Michael Schwarz-Rodrien and Matthew Pottiger. And if you join room 2, you will join Martina and Helen Merich and Markus Kohler. I also want to remind you that if you want to join a workshop after the session 6, you can. They are open, so you don't need a registration. You just join the workshop. If you want to see them, you can scroll the website that where you're watching the conference, and you will find workshops and hangouts there, so you can join them after the session 6. So now, 15 minutes coffee break. We will be back in 2:45.